All right, we're going to play a video intro real fast, and then we'll start bringing people up on the stage. I see you, Michael. Give us a minute. Okay. I will remember to record this one.
You want banks to report transactions of $600 or more. That's what the IRS wants. Does this mean that the government is trying to peek into our pocketbooks?
Look, the big picture is that we have a tax gap that over the next decade is estimated at $7 trillion, namely a shortfall in the amount that IRS is collecting due to a failure of individuals to report the income that they've earned.
But that's among billionaires. Is that among people who are transferring $600?
No, it tends to be among high-income individuals.
At the end of the day, I've spent nearly $6,000 of my earnings on taxes. That leaves me with a total of $12,000 to live on. That might seem like a lot of money, but 5-6 years ago, I was earning $12,000.
How does taxation without representation really affect how much the Crawford family has left to spend after it's paid its income taxes? Well, in 1972, Bob Crawford earned $12,000. Some of that income was not subject to income tax. After paying income tax on the rest, he had this much left to spend. 6 years later, he was earning $18,000 a year. By 1978, the amount free from tax was larger, but he was now in a higher tax bracket, so his taxes went up by a larger percentage than his income. However, those dollars weren't worth anything like as much. Even his wages, let alone his income after taxes, hadn't kept up with inflation. His buying power was lower than before. That is taxation without representation in practice.
Mr. Crystal has said repeatedly just how affordable all of this is. But our national debt is $30 trillion right now. We spend something like $1 trillion a year on militarism if you count the VA and the care and feeding of the nukes at the Energy Department and the rest of that. We absolutely cannot afford it. And if you ask the people who lost, people in the wars or in the terrorist attacks against this country in the meantime, their costs are a lot higher. If you have a think tank that's financed by arms manufacturers, then these are good times, and you don't probably understand what anybody else has to worry about. But there is severe, as they call it, economic anxiety in this country, mostly caused by the boom and bust crash cycle that we have. They call it the business cycle. It's the inflationary money cycle. And the reason they keep expanding the money supply is to make the world empire seem free. For all those checks he was cashing, they never raised his taxes once in the highest bracket because they just borrowed the money from China and printed it instead. And so then regular people are blowing their brains out because they're forced to carry this economy on their back.
Parts, they're going to help kick this thing off. All right, guys, ready? In 3, 2, 1.
Drivers, start your engine! Let's go, Brandon!
Welcome to Toxic Airwaves. There's like a mix of funny in that.
I hadn't seen that yet. Kid's a hero.
Yeah, kid's a legend.
I had to look up actually this afternoon what "Let's Go Brandon" is, where it came from.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was that Chris Pratt meme of I'm too stupid to figure out what it means or whatever that is.
Yeah, no, it was.
Or I don't know what it means.
Yeah, I mean it's become a viral meme, and it's pretty fantastic.
Hey, but fuck Janet Yellen, huh?
Yeah, fuck Janet Yellen.
God, I hate that bitch.
I don't know. I saw something about that. They're bumping that up to $10,000 reporting instead of the $600. So
yeah,
but I don't know. It doesn't matter at this point because they can go into your bank account without a warrant and see everything that's going on because it's not your money. But yeah, And then that clip of Scott Horton just body slamming Bill Kristol was absolutely phenomenal. If anybody hasn't watched that debate yet, go watch it. Just watching neocons that are responsible for death and destruction of thousands and thousands of people get completely demolished and humiliated is absolutely fantastic to watch. It gets me.
Speaking of that, shout out to Colin Powell. Joined the Iraqi children he helped kill today.
Yep. And George H.W. Bush. Yeah, that guy sucks.
Fuck those people, man.
But
anyway, on a positive note.
Yeah, I mean the Let's Go Brandon meme that's going on is a lot of fun because it is in response to the media failing to like redirect or spin a story in real time, and it's just catching on. But I guess the Canadian government is banning its employees from saying "Let's Go Brandon," which I thought was really funny. Shout out to the Canadian government. You guys are killing it. Well, we already got a ton of people in spaces.
Nice.
We got Joe Rogers, Weinicus, Arceris, and Michael Island Boy season. Did you see the Island Boy?
I unfortunately did see that, whatever it is that those kids were doing in the pool.
Yeah. Man. Guys in spaces, you got anything for us tonight?
Hey, I'm an island boy.
Good to have you, Weinicus. And Weinicus is a cool dude. Shout out BTC Kindergarten.
He's okay, I guess.
I like Weinicus.
That's the most value I could provide.
Weinicus runs the soundboard for BTC Kindergarten and does a very good job at it.
Yeah, does a better job than I do.
What's that clip you guys always play? Something about ice cold.
You mean the one about bars?
Maybe.
Yeah, that's a good
some guy yelling about something being ice cold.
Now listen, that's called motherfucking bars. That one?
Maybe. Yeah, I think sounds like it. Anyway,
I don't know. There's so many good ones. I was trying to brainstorm some more sounds for my soundboard. I've got a couple good ones, I think, but I need to revamp it a little bit. Let me look and see if I got anything new. But yeah, anyways.
Price is Wrong sound is good.
Yeah. Well, anyways, I titled this show tonight, Democracy. Gosh, Lurk's always talking shit. Lurk says Don and Brandon are best friends. That's funny. I titled this Democracy is a Failed System. And I think this is a pretty important conversation. I recently, shout out to Heavily Armed Clown who introduced me to Hans Hoppe, who is awesome dude. He's got some great writing and talks with the Mises Institute. But yeah, I mean, democracy is just dumb. I went together and put a bunch of clips together yesterday of just lots of people talking about, status and democracy, and it's apparent, like, watching where we're at right now, like globally, we have a lot of countries that are supposed democracies that are, supposed to represent, the interests of the people, and they're not in the slightest, or I mean, it's just the idea of, like, this majority rule is kind of a terrifying system, if you understand any bit of history. But yeah, we'll get into it a little bit more. I don't know. You got any thoughts on this topic?
I think just that it's super fun to watch. Like, the whole thing's falling apart, and I don't know, like that. Once I finally figured out what "Let's Go Brandon" means, I was like, oh my god, this is fucking perfect. Just because it's just one more example of, like, them doing their best to put on a show, and everybody with a double-digit or higher IQ is looking at that thinking, oh, no, like, this is fucking stupid. What are you guys doing? No, they're not saying that. They're saying fuck Joe Biden. And it's just, I don't know. I think it's entertaining to watch, and it's, oh yeah, I'm not wearing, the YouTube people are giving me shit. I'm not wearing my uniform. I'm wearing a proper shirt with sleeves today, no cutoff.
Good old mempool shirt.
But I'll fix that next week. But yeah, I don't know. It's been fun to watch. It's been interesting, and it's yeah, I think the rest of this year and the beginning of next year could get real exciting and super fun for Bitcoin. So that's exciting.
Yeah. I mean, there's the fun part of it, of watching the cathedral burn and all these maniacs, these parasites just look like complete morons. But then there's also the dark side of it, of like, we've lived in the U.S. in this empire that has gone, caused unimaginable destruction worldwide, in the name of democracy, in the name of, supposed freedom. We bomb and our country bombs, or government bombs and murders people in the name of, freedom. And, it's just like legacy of Colin Powell, like lying at the United Nations and, getting there's this really dark side of it, of like, Ross Ulbricht rotting in prison, or, the countless other people that, just for whatever reason, they decided to take these people's rights away and just throw them in a cage. Like, there's a fun part of like, yes, these idiots in power like Biden or, Trump or whoever, just looking like idiots and doing stupid things, but also the power that they wield to cause destruction is just, I don't know, pisses me off.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's definitely a ton of evil, and a lot of this, I don't know what everybody's thoughts are on karma, but I think a lot of this is starting to get resolved, and it's going to be, I don't know, like knowing that, this idea that Bill Kristol is going to have a good life in 20 years or 10 years, there's no way. No, that guy's totally fucked. Like Janet Yellen, this idea that Janet Yellen has a good life in 10, like there won't, I don't know. I don't think there will be Treasury secretaries in 10 or 15 years. And it's going to be, there's a lot of turmoil and pain right now, but it's going to be interesting to see how all this plays out. And I don't know, like these people that are securing control over the pile of ashes that we know as democracy and the government today and the nation state and all that, they're going to have a pretty rude awakening of how irrelevant they are and how powerless they are in the new world that we're going into. That is going to be a lot better.
Yeah. Well, I think this is why it's important to have these types of conversations and like say things like democracy is stupid, and we shouldn't be striving for it. And, here are the reasons why. Like, it's a, system that's completely incompatible with private property. Somebody can just vote to take all your shit, like they're trying to do right now. That's a stupid system, especially. Yeah, it's just a stupid system. And then, we just see like Hans Hoppe has a really good talk where he kind of compares democracy and monarchy. And, in a monarchy, you have hereditary privilege, just because you're born into the monarchy, you're given privilege, but, that same privilege exists in a democracy. You just have to be an elected official. And, you see it with Gavin Newsom, where he goes and does, makes these mandates and, goes and breaks them. Lori Lightfoot did it again. All of these different politicians. The Nancy Pelosi insider trading is, it's really funny to look at, but it's just, you see this, there's this complete corruption. And, we're taught in school that democracy or democratic republic, is the way they justify it. Maybe democracy isn't the best, but like this idea of some sort of federated government with checks and balances is this, amazing thing. And I think it's important that, it's been phenomenal for me to have that kind of broken down to, like, I think Eric Kaysen was my introduction to the idea that this wasn't, it's a horrible system. And kind of looking at how do we move away from democracy? How do we move towards localism? How do we actually like implement systems that don't throw people in cages for growing plants in their yard or putting it in their pipe or whatever? But yeah.
I think we just, on an individual by individual basis, make them as irrelevant as possible to our daily life. And that's, to me, that's the answer. It's like we've talked a whole bunch about political involvement. The answer is not, getting involved with politicians and pretending like they're not psychopaths. But the answer is accumulating as much sats for yourself as you possibly can and helping you and people that you care about be more free And AK-47 in our YouTube chat reminded, yes, 100K by Austin beefsteak is still locked in and guaranteed. So that's October 22nd. So by that Friday we'll be at 100K, and that is based on a very, very sophisticated TA model that I developed based on the idea that it would be super cool.
My girlfriend's favorite astrologist had a post today on Instagram about Bitcoin going off here pretty soon this month, and I got to get her name so I can add her clips and some of our stuff.
But anybody in Spaces, I'd be interested how anybody thinks that this. I mean, obviously the current government structure is fucking just completely stupid and going away and dying, and their ability to accumulate power and resources is trending to zero, all that. But anybody that has thoughts on what the short to medium to long term looks like and how all that might play out in a Bitcoin world, I would be super interested to hear that.
Well, I don't know about the short, medium, long term in the future, but, we should have known better, because one of the ancient Greeks and everybody, they were all afraid of democracy and what it did to us. That's why the United States hasn't officially been a democracy. We're a republic, and that is actually the thing that needs to happen, is go back to that, but on a smaller scale. But everybody, when the founding of the country and throughout history, realized that democracies tend toward the situation that we're in now, which is honestly the only reason why we're not worse off is because we have a constitution right now.
Hey guys, thanks for letting me up. I just have a couple ideas on the topic of democracy being a stupid failed system. They're not mine. I just like to regurgitate these as often as possible because they resonate with me. And the one is that democracy is two wolves and a sheep voting to eat mutton for dinner. And the other is that gang rape is a democratic process. And when you put things into that context, it does sort of illustrate the point that democracy is really just mob rule. And it sounds so lovely when you say it as democracy, but when you call it mob rule, obviously it resonates a little more on what can happen when you let that system run unchecked.
Yeah.
I think it crystallizes too that the solutions are technical, not political. And the solutions are us being able to secure and protect our own private property, Bitcoin being the most important thing, but obviously tons of other stuff too. And then, that's the solution, is them saying, hey, we voted that your taxes are now this. And it's like, oh, I decided, you can go fuck yourself. Like, how's that for a solution? And then it's like, well, no, but the majority says. I don't give a fuck what the majority says. The mob has never mattered in all of history, and it never will.
Yeah, I think that's great. Michael Malice has a quote, my rights are not up for discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely struggle with the idea of really, I think the Constitution is well-intentioned, or Saris, but I struggle with the idea of when you say a smaller scale republic, what do you mean by that?
I'm not saying that what we have isn't on the verge of failure. It absolutely is. It's just looking around the world, at least at the other English-speaking countries. The only reason why we're not Australia right now is because we have a constitution. It's doing what it was designed to do. It's just it's a 200-year assault on it, and it's failing and creaking under the weight of all of the assaults it's had. But it's the best thing in the world right now, unfortunately. That said, I totally agree. Everything should be local rule. And one of the awesome things that Bitcoin does, not just in the sense of go fuck yourself if you raise the taxes, but if it makes returns to violence unsustainable, then superstates can't exist. And if superstates can't exist, then supermassive military campaigns are, generally speaking, not really possible anymore. So I do put a lot of hope in that being a necessary result of all of this.
Yeah.
And another thing I'd be curious to hear if anybody has thoughts on is what kind of I don't know how to phrase it exactly. It was something I've been thinking about. Is what because it's like, to me, it's pretty clear we're probably going to have some new form of aristocracy. Like, it won't be hereditary like the old world, but there will be, I don't know, call it the remnant, call it whatever, words are floating around now. But like this idea that there will be a very, very small subset that, I mean, just by looking at the number of people that control significant amounts of Bitcoin, you could get there. But just kind of in general, like, to me, it just seems like there's probably going to be some new form of I don't know, aristocracy is just the best word I can think of to account for it. And it's like this idea that there will be, I don't know, like not
some sort of hierarchy.
Yeah, like that there'll be hierarchy, but and what gets me thinking about is this, this idea, we talk about the mob all the time, the masses, the 80-90% that, doesn't have a functioning mind, that kind of stuff. And it's like those people have a lot of worth and a lot to contribute, I think, and a lot, like, in the right context, can be very, very useful. And so one of the things I wonder is, well, how, like, what does the world look like? Like, how are those people living in 20 years, in 30 years, in 50 years, in 100 years, once we've all moved on to a Bitcoin standard? And like, one thing I've kind of been kicking around is like this idea that there's some sort of new aristocracy that develops that provides structures for those people to just live peacefully, and prosper within. But, it's obviously not a structure where they have input on what property someone else owns or what can or cannot be taken from them or things like that. But yeah, so it's like a combination of like these hierarchies developing around who effectively controls wealth across long periods of time, and then also kind of these hierarchies around just certain numbers of people that can be taken care of in certain ways. I don't know if any of that makes any sense, or if anyone has any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't know.
It just seems, I don't know, it
I
seems to
can't
me like there will be some
understand
kind
a
of.
word you're saying.
I mean, I think like my.
Have you tried turning your hearing aids on, Clancy?
I have that button
All the way up.
I have that button just for you, Clancy. Yeah. I mean it. Okay.
There we go. What's 12 saying?
12 says, I don't see Bitcoin as ushering in an aristocracy necessarily. At least I don't see it ushering in further centralization as a result. Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah. Yeah, in my mind, it'd be decentralizing. It'd be like, I think a lot of the power that's wrapped up in the nation state will just evaporate. Like, that no one should have that power. Like, there's just a ton of things that it does that no one should have that ability to do, and they won't once it's not supported by fiat, nonsense anymore. But it's like there will be, I mean, there will be people, like, just on the basic logistics level, like, there will be people who control huge amounts of wealth and property and things like that, and their relationship to the masses and what that looks like is something that I think could be pretty interesting to think about how that might play out or not. But
yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting. I wonder, if the way that we organize. I was talking. I had Shishi on my podcast this week, and we were talking about this idea that he called a meshdadel of, trading with people, maybe not necessarily in your local community or jurisdiction, but he was presenting the idea that him and I could potentially, with our attempts to garden, produce food at home, we could start trading between each other. And, something that, the sovereign individual talks about a little bit is how the internet disrupts jurisdictions quite a bit, and how, people could, I mean, you see this with like companies being decentralized, it's interesting to think about, the ways that we'll kind of organize together going forward in the future, and how that might be different than like local jurisdictions. Because, I mean, when you get into some of this, anarcho-capitalist writing, there's things like private law and private policing, and could those things, exist across, different boundaries, across different, what we look at today as countries. And could it be similar to like what, cell phone companies like today, or like an insurance or TV provider or Netflix or something? You just have your subscription to whatever service, and they're there, to offer you services. It's interesting to think about. I don't know.
Yeah.
So that could fit into that kind of hierarchy that you're talking about.
I think a lot of it does come through much more sophisticated and I don't know. Yeah, just like much more sophisticated insurance markets. I mean, it's like, like I really think within our lifetime you'll be able to buy insurance for all kinds of things that you can't buy today. Like, like defense against other nation states, all kinds of interesting things.
Should we start like a insurance against the IRS? Like if they come after.
Sounds like a bad business model right now. But actually, insurance, here's your free insurance against the IRS. Buy Bitcoin, self-custody, CoinJoin.
Okay, well, I see.
Be ready to leave the country.
Yeah. 12 says whatever the structures look like, or whatever, or not, a superstructure is even
discernible.
The personal responsibility implied by what Bitcoin is bringing will have a learning curve. Scary. Yeah,
totally agree with that.
Point. Yeah, I mean, this is something like, I mean, Bitcoin has definitely brought me into this world of, self-responsibility in a new way, of looking at things from first principles and just, I mean, there's so much I think that, the average person takes for granted right now, with everything with food production, being a big one on my mind. With public education, we're seeing this right now. It's just like people, just dump their kids off in these public schools without, really thinking about what's happening. And that's getting threatened. There's just so much, out there, that, Bitcoin, like, I mean, just with banking, in particular, it's just like, I just have my money magically appear in my bank account after I work for 2 weeks. And then, all I have to do is swipe a debit card, and and it's FDIC insured. And that's very different than, if you lose your, key phrase, is just gone, or if you forget your password, or, whatever, if you do something stupid, your house burns down and you don't have things, secured properly, it's gone. It's a very, very different mindset. But I think it's a good mindset. I mean, I think that, have you ever read Jocko Willink's book, Extreme Ownership?
Yeah. Yeah, I like that one, and then his dichotomy of leadership's decent too.
Yeah. No, I'm a fan of that, but I think that that's just like an empowering thing in the end of like, yes, the learning curve is intense. There's a lot to learn when it comes to like securing your Bitcoin, when it comes to, I mean, man, like I've been getting into gardening and I have no idea what I'm doing, and building a chicken coop, and had very remedial woodworking skills, which, people will see if they see my chicken coop when it's done. But there's all these things that I think are really important, but it's also very empowering when it's like, I am growing less dependent on the banking system, I'm growing less dependent on the government, I'm growing less dependent on, grocery stores and these supply chains that are getting demolished right now.
And the vast majority of people won't make any of those jumps. It just kind of is what it is. Like the vast majority of people are going to have an extremely difficult and miserable decade, I think. And, it's like we help as many as we can, but you can't force somebody to see the value in self-custody Bitcoin. You can't force people to do any of these things. Like all we can do is tell them about it, give them a glimpse of, how our life's been improved by it, and then see what they do with that.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's a lot less people following solid sovereign Bitcoiners, when they produce content and on Twitter versus like the Mike Alfreds and Log Scales, the morons like that.
The people pretending to be rich.
Yeah. 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 We should have a
every time I hear those guys talk, it's like, no, I mean, I don't claim to be rich, but it's like, I've talked to rich people. You guys are not. You guys are a bunch of LARPers. Like, fuck yourself.
Yeah. Well, anyways, I got some thoughts on the Ted Cruz Jimmy Song interview.
Oh, I still haven't listened to it yet.
Yeah, it was all right. It was cool that Jimmy had that opportunity. It's cool that Ted Cruz did that and all. We're not fans of Ted Cruz on this show, but it felt like he was being pretty honest, which I thought was, one of the things he said is like, I don't have a lot of power to do anything good for Bitcoin. It's up to you as people to do it, because there's these people in positions of power that really hate it because it threatens their power. They're directly incentivized to fight it. And I thought that was pretty solid. It was pretty in line with the stuff that we've been saying for a while. And I think, ultimately the powerful tool in this circumstances, like, cover your bases, don't comply, build out, parallel structures. If it's a black market, so be it. And yeah, that was kind of my takeaway from it.
I'm glad it was, like I said, I haven't watched it yet, but I'm glad it was Jimmy that had that conversation. He's just absolutely perfect for that.
He did a really good job.
Yeah. He's obviously just incredibly smart, but on top of that, I don't know, his just ability to communicate with people at all kinds of different levels, but especially someone like Ted Cruz. I think he's just very, very effective at that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, what it brings up, like, I had Eric Kaysen on my podcast, and one of the things he talked about was how we need to start creating this balkanization right now, like here and now, and we can create that in using peer-to-peer markets. I mean, I think it's awesome. Like, if you have the opportunity to, pay a, handyman working at your house, or just your babysitter, just small odd jobs like that, to pay them in Bitcoin versus fiat. You can do that with Strike if you don't want to send them your Bitcoin or whatever. But, starting to create these markets as much as possible, and these, getting together with Bitcoiners. I mean, it was so super cool talking with Shishi, about the stuff he's doing. Like, I want to buy seeds from him, as a Bitcoiner versus, somebody like Ace Hardware or whatever. And then we've got cool things. If you want to buy some good old cast iron that isn't shit, we know a guy that's a Bitcoiner that does that on Twitter.
Caleb, what's his handle?
Caleb Hotl.
HOTL. I'm on the list. He's got a pretty good backlog, but I'm on the list for one of his cast iron pans. He's out here in Arizona, which is a state that does not LARP on Liberty like Texas does. Actually, on that topic, if anyone, I have not heard a single good argument against this idea that Texas LARPs on Liberty. If anybody is misguided enough to think that they have one, I would love to hear it from Spaces.
I don't know.
Are you talking about Austin? Or are you
I'm talking about the whole state.
Yeah.
LARPs on Liberty, no different from Alabama, Missouri, Tennessee, all these other states. It's a bunch of marketing gimmicks in a 200-year-old fort that makes people think Texas is something special.
Okay, so what about all the shit the governor just passed about, like, you can't mandate vaccines, you're not allowed to do any of that shit?
There's tons of other states doing that. Arizona's doing the same thing, but better.
I know, but how is that a LARP?
So my problem with Texas is that it's got this whole big cheerleading crowd that says it's the greatest thing ever. It's the bastion of liberty. It's cowboy country. It's, come here if you want to be free. We're going to be the first to secede, like all this stuff. My contention is that's all marketing gimmicks, and that marketing's the only thing that differentiates Texas from the rest of the South, or really anywhere else. Tennessee, like I said, Missouri. I think all those states are every bit as.
You're not answering the question.
Okay, what was your question?
How is them like enforcing all of these standards, like against the mandates? How is that LARPing?
I don't think that
they're
specifically
literally
is
following
LARP. I think
through.
in general. I mean, it's like another example is like there are so many states that handled COVID way better than Texas. So it's like, okay, I'm happy they're doing vax mandates in October of 2021, but where were they all the way through 2020 and the first half of 2021? I mean, it was, I don't know. Like I've told a whole bunch of people this, but like Austin was worse on the hysteria than anything. And I know people are gonna say Austin's not Texas, whatever, but Austin was worse on
Fuck Austin. Austin's for blue-haired commie bitches.
Yeah, that's who's completely taken it over. But, and it's that's just my broader point is that there's nothing special about Texas. That's the core point, that it LARPs on liberty because they have this idea that it's, I don't know, it's so basically that the marketing doesn't live up to the reality would be another way I think of phrasing it.
They're literally doing everything that they stand for.
Clancy, Steve came up with a little catchy meme.
Hey,
and he can't back it up. He's a fucking bullshitter.
There's a dozen states with better gun laws. There's at least a dozen states with better self-defense laws. There's plenty of places with better taxes. There's plenty of places with fewer, conservatives that are trying to get in your business. Like I don't know. I think
it sounds like a weak argument. It sounds like you're failing. Clancy asked you one question twice and you didn't answer it good.
Wait, who's failing me?
Texas LARPs on
really.
COVID stuff. Okay, if they took the
I get more specific because before that it was Texas LARPs on liberty, and I'm not a big Texas fan. I just want you to stand your ground here. Come on.
Yeah, don't be a little.
Austin
bitch,
is the LARP.
Austin is the fucking LARP.
Y'all are LARPs. Florida is where to be.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll take Florida over Texas anyway. Wyoming, South Dakota, Missouri, Arizona. I think these are all much better options than Texas.
Listen, I don't want to be fucking cold all the time. Okay, I'm not.
I don't know what you're talking about. It's
I also
75 and sunny today.
No. I'm talking about like I would go to Wyoming, but like y'all, I'm not gonna go live in the fucking mountains in the snow. I'm just not gonna do it. And then I also don't want to get hit by a hurricane We weighed all the options. We weighed them all out. And like middle of the country, weather-wise, not going to die from a hurricane. It seems like the best option.
I don't have a problem with somebody wanting to live in Texas. The issue that I take is this idea that it's something special. There's tons like in all, I like to talk about Arizona because that's where I live. In all reality, it's not that special of a place, which I'm totally fine with. That doesn't bother me at all.
I would have a shit on Arizona meme, but I don't know anything about Arizona because it's so unspecial.
It's so insignificant. I don't even know what to say about it.
Let's keep it that
fucking
way.
like adobo huts or something.
See, we have the most diverse geography in the entire U.S. So
there you go.
We're more diverse geographically than you guys are. We're not diverse as a function of our people. Our demographics aren't, but
I was totally going to bring that up, like how diverse you were on your geography. That's what I was going to say.
Well, sorry that we have some of the coldest temperatures and hottest temperatures in the country.
It's great.
Clancy, you're so wrong. So shut the fuck up. Clearly, LARP.
But on your original point, like saying vaccines and masks are stupid in October of 2021 is not a massive accomplishment.
Yeah, it's a
like
bet.
doing what South Dakota did in March of 2020 and saying fuck this noise.
Yeah.
That's an accomplishment. South Dakota did way better than Arizona. I'm not going to defend Arizona.
So you think that Texas is saying like we're better than South Dakota and we're better than Arizona? Is that where you're getting butthurt about it?
Yes.
I see a lot of people who have an assumption that I think has not been questioned or tested very effectively. And that assumption is that there's something special about Texas. Like the assumption is that if secession time comes, Texas is going to be at the front of the pack. That Texas is where if you love freedom and if you love liberty, you go to Texas. Like those are all assumptions that I don't see any evidence for and I think are unfounded. And I see a lot of people that hold those assumptions without actually testing them.
Have you ever stayed in so your family, didn't you have family like in Austin?
Yeah,
so
I grew up mostly in Texas.
Okay, so your only experience of Texas is Austin? Is that what I'm hearing?
No, middle of nowhere, South Texas is where I grew up. Small town, not nowhere near Austin.
And you didn't get any sort of vibe of like it being a different vibe than everywhere else?
No, I don't see any evidence that it's fundamentally different from those other states, Missouri, Tennessee, Alabama, anywhere in the South. And so like, because that's what a lot of people say is, oh, it's better than California. Yeah, of course. Though any red state's better than California. Like,
I don't know. I've never been to that place. Don't go there.
Yeah, I avoid it.
I like the meme, and I think it's easier to think about if you think about Texas as being super fucking conservative. And of course, if you're a conservative, you're going to LARP on liberty. It's kind of antithetical to it.
Yes.
So like their abortion bill, there's nothing fucking, there's no liberty in that. That's just a conservative ass bill. That's a good example, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm not familiar.
I agree.
I'm not familiar with the bill, but I do think that's another like a big advantage that I see in Arizona. Like Arizona has like a baseline culture that's way more libertarian than it is conservative or anything else. And obviously we still have a giant, per capita rate of status cucks everywhere it does. But the baseline culture in a place like Arizona or Wyoming or these different places, I think is much more libertarian than it is conservative. And that's, so when people talk about, oh, well, Arizona's going to flip blue or Texas is red or this, it's like you're talking about a stupid made-up competition where the numbers, it's like whose line is it anyway? The points are fake. It doesn't matter. Dead people vote. Like none of this stuff, like the whole thing's ridiculous.
Yeah, I really like that show.
No, it's a funny show, but the points, that's their tagline. The points are made up or doesn't matter. It's voting elections, the same thing. Like to me, like what I look at is like the baseline culture of a place and how those people generally respond to tyranny. And I think that there are much on that metric, especially. I think there are much better options than Texas.
Yeah,
I think the
like
point is, guys. I think a distillation is you LARP on liberty if once you get the reins of power, you use them to punish your enemies.
Yes.
Like if you are willing to dish out the shit that you've been taking as soon as you get power, then you LARP on liberty. And I think that's the case for any conservative too, because they want to put their own little bullshit in place as soon as they get power.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like whose line is it anyways, except the line that we're talking about are the voting lines, and nobody knows whose line it is because it's always being redrawn during gerrymandering shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask a Bitcoin question?
Absolutely.
I listen. I'm a fan. I don't want to sound like I'm doing a hypothetical here. I love Bitcoin. I'm stacking sats. Don't get me wrong. I'm just asking, like, the principle of Bitcoin, the digital scarcity, the finite amount. That's fantastic. But looking at it from like a statewide or nationwide or worldwide perspective, would there be something like as a creation, not like as new Bitcoin, for example, like the distribution? If there's, let's say, 70 million wallets in the world that are holding Bitcoin right now, if there's 7 billion people, how would there be a distribution like to give everybody sats? Or I don't know, in another way, like let's say, for example, if not to restart the same chain I'm saying, but like to replace the dollar with something with a finite amount of exactly like a Bitcoin, like, with the blockchain trilemma, security and decentralization. Would there be something behind that where, like, instead of like having this amount of Bitcoin in so few hands right now, if there were to be like a principle of Bitcoin, but airdrop to the world, everybody has, equal amount to start or something like that? Has anybody ever like had that conversation? I'm curious.
Yeah. So here's the thing about money is you get money by producing things of value. And that's how Bitcoin gets distributed, is when people start actually doing things to earn Bitcoin, so you just start using Bitcoin in trade. So if you live in some random part of the world, you're going to have resources, you're going to have a way to make money, or somebody is that you're going to be able to work for. And that's ultimately how it gets distributed. And the cool thing about Bitcoin is it's not distributed through bullshit, debt economics and fiat money. So it's actually rewarding people that are producing things of value rather than just sitting around and doing nothing. So that's ultimately how it gets distributed.
I agree 100%. I'm just saying, like, the principle of like whoever started with it, the lost keys and all that, like, I don't mind that much so much, but I'm saying like the early movers obviously have an advantage. But I'm just saying, like, look, there's like, let's say there's 70 million people that have it. It's like, it's not, I don't want to call it fairness per se, but like there's something of an element to that where there's like some people controlling a huge amount, and obviously they should have that advantage in a way. Like it's kind of this weird like dichotomy. They should have that advantage as a first mover, but at the same time, like I'm just looking at like a worldwide like perspective. Like how would there be a way that we could use the Bitcoin principles to do something with like to maybe change money in general, like the American dollar, to like make it worthwhile? Because every fiat that's ever existed has failed. That's why Bitcoin exists and is thriving right now. But I'm just trying to understand like if there's ever been that conversation, something around that.
Yeah, I think one big advantage of Bitcoin is that it requires no change to human nature, and it embraces human nature. It embraces the baseline. You know, I'm not a postmodernist. I think there's one reality that we all live in and that we all subscribe to, and so I think that Bitcoin is the most pure, like almost embodiment of that. And it's how, I don't know, it doesn't like, you know, like there is no, you know, and I'm not trying to dog on you at all, but you know, you used the word should. Like there is no should in Bitcoin. It is what it is, and people respond to that or they don't. Like kind of you know, another point you had, you know, I think you said there's 70 million wallets, you know, that hold some amount of Bitcoin, you know, whatever that number is. The vast majority of the world will never do an on-chain transaction. They're just, the numbers don't work. And, you know, and I even think the vast majority of the world will probably, you know, I mean, just by definition, if you define owning Bitcoin as controlling keys, the vast majority of the world will never own Bitcoin. They'll have financial products that are built on Bitcoin. They'll live in a society that's fundamentally changed by Bitcoin. They'll benefit in that way. They'll
Bitcoin banks will emerge, and they'll just be lazy as fuck and do Bitcoin banks.
Yeah, or they might have something backed by Bitcoin. You know, the details of that, nobody has any idea how exactly it'll work out. But what we can know for sure is that the vast majority of the world will never own Bitcoin defined as securing keys. You know, people say I own Bitcoin on Coinbase. I think that's incorrect. So I think that's a big one, that a lot of people, you know, they'll have all these financial services built on top of Bitcoin. Their life will improve in very, very measurable ways, but it won't come from directly owning Bitcoin, like, you know, presumably a lot of people on here today do, and that the people that do will be, I think, part of that pretty significant subset that does control. And also, like, if somebody, you know, acquired Bitcoin in 2009 and still has it today, you know, not like they need my approval anyway, but that's, in my view, like that's somebody who has absolutely earned that, you know, whatever that term means. Like, I don't think they got lucky. I don't think, you know, they fell into it, anything like that. Like, if somebody, because most people that did, they lost it or they spent it on shit coins or drugs or, you know, who knows what. Like, you know, basically everybody who was around in 2009, 2010 has nothing left. And so the people that do, there's something very, very special about those people, most likely.
Yeah, so 12 brought up a great point in chat. So 12 says, there's no way to give early adopters an advantage. Fairness is a commie idea. Early adoption is fair. And I think this is kind of an interesting point. Like, when we define fairness in a system like this, it's not unfair that somebody has more than somebody else. What's unfair is the rules that are set. Like in the fiat system, for example, where Nancy Pelosi gets to go and vote on subsidies and insider trade on that, or vote on regulations and insider trade on that, while sitting and earning a paycheck from stolen money that she didn't produce anything of value. She just you know, ordered some people to go and take money from other people. Like that's unfair. Or, you know, the person that has like BlackRock, for example, that essentially like gets to seat people in regulatory positions of power and controls the government, and then sits closer to this money printer and gets to go and buy up all the houses for like 0% interest when we're paying, you know, interest rates to buy homes. Like that's what's unfair, and Bitcoin kind of eliminates that unfairness where, instead of being able to do things like that, it's a lot harder to steal the money to fund it. So
I'm just looking at it from the angle of like the idea of hard money and digital scarcity. That's like kind of my first principles thing. It's like that's what we're trying to eliminate. Like, people just the money printer. That's like kind of my concern. Like that's why I think that's what it's solving. But I'm just looking at like the distribution. If it's like 7 million people and they have like obviously the early adopters, they should have an advantage. And I'm not saying like it's quote unquote fairness and all that stuff. Like I'm not going that far. I'm just saying like looking at it from that way, it's like aren't we just creating a new wealth class in a way, like of these people that like okay they were in first and then they're gonna have some extraordinary power if it goes the way, like if it becomes the unit of account, etc. It's like kind of this dichotomy again.
Yes.
So the way you're thinking about this would make sense in a fiat world, because in a fiat world, the rich stay richer and the poor get poorer, right? But on a Bitcoin standard, the divide can't. The divide is gap. Like the gap can't last, right? Because people's wealth can't continue to get devalued, and they can't keep printing money. So the people that are at the top are going to be held accountable. And it took me a long time to understand the question, like the answer to the question that you're asking, because I was thinking in fiat, and that's the only thing that we know, right? Is how our monetary system works, and we know nothing else. So this whole new idea of money shifts your mind from money being this like materialism thing to this belief system, and it holds everyone accountable. So the level field is the playing field is leveled, because it doesn't matter how much you have. Everyone's even. Does that make sense? Because you can't continue to climb something that doesn't exist.
I see where you're going. I'm just trying to articulate like this aspect of like if two people had like 5 million Bitcoin each and everybody else has the remaining 10 million. I mean, that's possible. Let's say the other 5 million. I mean, those people, aren't they like the most powerful people in the world, like in the Bitcoin standard world, if that's the unit of account? See what I'm saying? I'm just throwing out like a hypothetical again, trying to understand that aspect.
Yeah, of course.
That's a good thing though. We want the Bitcoiners in charge.
I mean, but like even like the most extreme scenario, like let's say that person with 5 million Bitcoin, becomes a warlord and uses it to buy a ton of weapons and then, armies, and they, enslave people, they, take over countries or whatever. Like even in that, and nobody, at least as far as I know, nobody owns 5 million Bitcoin, but it's like even in that scenario, the scale at which they can cause harm is so much lower than the nation state today. And so that would be a terrible outcome. The people that live in the area that person takes over, that's a bad life I don't want for anybody. That's not a good outcome. I don't want that to happen. But it's like even in that extreme scenario, like how much better off is the world? Because it's like that person's, it's like in a Bitcoin world, you can't create money out of thin air. You can't create money by, hitting Control P on a computer down at the Federal Reserve. Like you create money by being valuable in some way and getting someone to, for the most part, voluntarily give you that value because they want something that you have, And so it's like, and so it's definitely, it's not that there aren't going to be any bad outcomes. I mean, it's like there's going to be very wealthy people who are also like bad people that, beat their kid or, whatever. Like there's going to be wealthy people who are bad people. But I think for me at least, the broader point is that the baseline level of violence in the world is, I think it's just undeniable that it's going to go down dramatically. And the baseline level of human flourishing, to me, it's undeniable that that's just going to go up dramatically. And
so can I give y'all a good example that helped me think about this? Like, I was listening to this podcast one time about how still to this day, African American farmers in the South are to this day still being suppressed so much because they'll go to the bank to get a loan for a farm or for their farm, say, and the people in the bank know who they are. They have the leg up. They have to apply for it. They see their race. They see everything that's happening. So these people who have already had a leg up are going to continue to get the leg up. And this black farmer who wants to get a loan to expand his farm is going to continue to not have those advantages. But on a Bitcoin standard, you can start off with $1, right? And go in, work hard, earn some money, take a loan out against your Bitcoin. No one sees who you are. No one's discriminating against you. Everyone's held accountable, right? So this black farmer in a white world will be able to climb like he should be because of his proof of work and what he is doing versus like him being judged by the white bankers that don't want them to take over the land or for whatever reason they don't like them, right? Because I listened to this podcast about how, for like when the slaves were freed, they should have been the ones who dominated the farming industry, right? They were the ones who did all the work, who had all the knowledge on the farming. But because of, the white men and the fiat system, they just suppressed all that knowledge and they were just constantly undercutting them. And so they still couldn't get a leg up. It makes absolutely no sense because they're the ones that are doing the proof of work, right? So that's just like a small scenario on, a large scale of a way to think about like how proof of work can actually have this ripple effect through the world just by using Bitcoin.
100% I see the need in the world. There's no doubt about that.
And Clancy, on your example, it's illegal for someone to come in and say, wait, the bank wouldn't give you a loan. You're a great farmer. You make great money. Like I'll do that. What would, all I want's a 5% return, or like in a hyper Bitcoinized world, like it's illegal. Like these regulators will come in and say, no, you can't, you're a nobody. You can't loan against, whatever. But it's like, once we get rid of a lot of these structures that are already going away quickly, there's going to be so much, because then we get into a world where, somebody's out there and they say, hey, I've got, I'm a great, we're not in the world today where, Bitcoin could go from 60 whatever to 100,000 next week. That's entirely possible. But it's like once things are stabilized and chill out, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be looking to invest their capital. And some guy who's fantastic at running a farm and knows what he's doing and, just happens to be a different race from some retarded banker in a little town. That's
actual proof of work will actually be a thing everywhere. It won't just be something that we use when we're talking about Bitcoin. Because being on a Bitcoin standard, it holds everyone accountable. Everyone's on the same level. It's just like the ultimate truth. So if you are the better farmer, you are going to be able to get ahead because of sound money.
Yeah. Tyson's going to go out of business. Thank God.
I want
both of them. Neil deGrasse Tyson too.
Yeah, man, fuck that guy. I want to touch upon, I think the concept of violence that you talked about. I think that large-scale violence won't be economically viable, but I think localized violence will actually rise. And I think that essentially the government structure will regress in a sense, and the individual states, right? So like we'll regress into a society. I say regress, but it's not really regress. We'll go back into a society where it's mostly city-states really that have the individual wealth, right? Because if you look at it like from the United States perspective, the thing that's really holding it together is the U.S. dollar, right? You take the U.S. dollar out of the equation, right? What's holding the U.S. together, really? Like, what is it, like a common army? Is it common language, right? Each individual state has radically different cultures, right?
Yeah.
So I think that...
Yeah, like Texas and Arizona are like not the same.
I know.
Exactly.
One's free, the other's not.
So when you look at Florida, for example, you come to South Florida, it's literally another country. You walk through Calle Ocho, people only speak Spanish, right? So like, I think that once this fiat dollar once this, like, because the seat of power is DC, and the reason for that is that's where the money printer is, right? That's where the money printer of the world reserve currency is. So it's created this giant bureaucratic fucking government that, like, it has way overgrown its intended purpose, and I don't think that's viable in the long term. And I think that once that collapses, and I think that we're already starting to see cracks in it, just like the ridiculous statements from the Biden administration, like this infrastructure bill is going to cost it's going to cost $0. Like, what the fuck are you saying? The inflation is coming from the fact that people aren't taking the vaccine. They're actually saying that, like, on mainstream media. Like, it's insane. Inflation is coming from companies raising the prices on material. No one's talking about the money printer. And if you just kind of, like, because, like, history tends to repeat itself. If you look at, like, the Roman Republic and the Roman Empire, like, how it just kind of escalated over time, the moral degradation of society was directly correlated with how much the debasement of money happened, right? Yeah. So the more that the money was debased, right? In the beginning of the Roman Republic, it was like every denarii, which is the currency at the time, had 95% silver. Towards the end, it was 0.0005% silver. So it was disconnected from reality. And now we're living in a world where this money is so fake that they leave $80 billion of equipment in Afghanistan. We're all supposed to be okay with it, but at the same time, they want to check every single transaction over $600 in a bank account. Yeah. You know, like, I think history is repeating itself, but the only difference right now is that we have a chance to break that cycle of boom and bust with Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is an uncorruptible money because of the way that the protocol is designed.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you make, but I just want to counter on that. Like, for example, the Chinese situation, you're saying that we're going to go back into, like, city states. I think that, I mean, I'm just hypothetically, if the Chinese, they were to make a closed loop digital yuan, it would still, you know, avoid BTC and stay as one nation. So that kind of scenario, I don't know how it would play out. But another scenario, again, I don't know if you want to say something on that, but if the U.S., let's say, for example, to go to the Bitcoin standard, buys all outstanding BTC, 5 million, 2 million, whatever it is, that's a possibility. Then what would happen? You know, how would the world evolve? You know, speaking on, like, you know, the debasement of fiat. Or if the U.S. government, the Treasury, would tokenize the dollar, take all fiat, you know, turn into a CBDC and cap it at, like, let's say 50 trillion. I don't know. There's a lot of, like, different ways this could play out.
If they do the CBDCs, they're going to be shooting themselves in the foot for the next 1,000 years. You know, because if you look at, like, what happened with China and India and why they kind of failed to be as dominant despite having tons and tons of resources, huge populations, is because that they went on a less harder money. And I think ultimately you're going to see regions like South America and Eastern Europe that are adopting Bitcoin at a much faster rate be dominant, you know, for a much longer time. So, I mean, the Chinese can do their CBDCs, the U.S. can do their CBDCs, and they can have fun staying poor, you know, like,
so
it's, yeah.
So I think, Jeff, you made a fascinating point. And I think in the beginning of the book, the pre-word of the sovereign individual, he talks exactly about what you were talking about. And he talks about how the future is divided into two outcomes, right? The Chinese way is relying on AI to essentially, you know, and Elon Musk's girlfriend touched upon this a little bit as well, that AI could solve the problem of communism. And then we have the other way, which is the way of freedom, which relies on cryptography. Now, the United States, you know, unfortunately, the left is going to have a hard time figuring this out. But the way that the United States was designed, right, was designed with decentralization in mind, right? Each individual state has tremendous sovereignty over the federal government. That's been eroded over time, right? But now that you introduce Bitcoin into the mix, right, Texas is going to defend Bitcoin to the death, and so is Wyoming, right? So as long as there's individual states that are Bitcoin states, they're going to flourish. And what's going to happen is you're going to see exactly what's happening right now is that people are leaving New York, people are leaving California, and they're going to more freedom-friendly states, right? So in the United States, it's actually extremely difficult for a central government just to take over everything. Now, China, on the other hand, which is really why I recommend reading this book, if they take the route of AI, right, where like an AI essentially gets to dictate, okay, this is where the resources should be, this is where the resources should be. Yeah, that is a very interesting idea. But I think what made America great, what made America like the most successful country, it has nothing to do with race, it has nothing to do with the population. It was the idea of the freedom of the individual to pursue happiness, right? And if you look at that idea and how many great corporations have come out of this country from different nationalities, it's, like Steve Jobs' parents were immigrants, right? Like if you just look at the list, like I'm an immigrant myself, right? Yeah. What makes this country great? What makes this country great is the freedom of the individual to pursue excellence, right? And China doesn't have that. China still has this top-down mentality where I'm a central authority and therefore I can make a better decision than anybody else. And if you look at history, for example, that has always ended in catastrophe. If you want to look at the Soviet Union, if you want to look at China, if you want to look at Nazi Germany, it's the same story over and over and over again, where it's this overarching ideology, right, of these elites at the top that think they know what's better for everybody else rather than every single individual making their own decision, also known as the free market, right? So as you've seen, and I think Ron Paul has touched upon this as well, right? Is that if you allow individuals to make their own decisions, society prospers. And the more that society regresses towards a collective, a centralized authority, kind of like where we're heading now in the United States, with the Democrats and, the wokeness and the critical race theory, which was just Marxism disguised as they did a little bait and switch, right? You see how much that affects the economy. You see how much that affects people's emotions. You see how much that divides people, right? So, it's going to be really interesting to see China go down this path of AI. And, if they perfect, the utopia on Earth and that, through AI, I have no idea. It'd be really interesting, though.
Did you just reference Grimes?
I did reference Grimes because she mentioned this, the exact thing that I told you about how communism could potentially, theoretically, it could be, because the issue with communism, right, is the idea on paper is beautiful, right? Like, to each their own, I forget.
No, it's not. It's fucked up.
No, but think about it, right? Like everyone, think about it, right? Like no one owns anything. Everyone lives in an open, beautiful society. No one's better than anyone else. Everyone's equal, right? That's the idea. That's the theoretical idea of communism, right? They can't achieve that. And the reason you can't achieve that is because the only way to achieve that is with violence, right? You can't achieve equality without literally taking it from somebody else and giving it to someone else. The free market, on the other hand, allocates resources based on what Bitcoin is based on, proof of work, right? How much work you put into it. What's your idea? What value do you provide? And then resources are allocated to you in that way, right? Their theory, though, is that through AI, through artificial intelligence, right, that artificial intelligence would be able to allocate resources better than the free market. That's the theory, and that's what Grimes is referencing, and that's what Peter Thiel referenced in the beginning of the sovereign individual.
Yeah, I think the fundamental difference I see is that like all these other systems require a change to human nature for success. Like, the China model, what the U.S. is currently pursuing, Western Europe, like all these different models of how to orchestrate society. They all, for them to succeed long term, they require a fundamental change to human nature. And, one huge advantage I see in Bitcoin is that it does not. Bitcoin just is what it is. It integrates with the natural law that humans have been experiencing for as long as we've been on this earth, you know, a couple 100,000 million years, however long it is. And Bitcoin takes that as a given and says, okay, here's how we move value. Here's how we understand value. Here's how we interact with value, you know, across the entire world. And that's, to me, like, that's what a lot of, I don't know, like when I talk to somebody who's, you know, super blue pilled or just an outright commie or, you know, whatever, like I don't talk specifics. I don't try to change their mind on anything. Like, they're probably totally hopeless. Like, what I try to do is get them to think through, you know, my worldview requires a fundamental change to human nature for success. You know, maybe a fundamental change to human nature is coming. I can't predict the future, but that seems incredibly unlikely. And, you know, Bitcoin does not. Bitcoin takes human nature as a given and says, okay, here's the incentives, here's the game theory, here's the, you know, all the stuff that we've all studied quite a bit. And that, I don't know, that to me, that whole idea is just fascinating to me. And I love turning people onto that. But.
To touch on what you were kind of both saying, it's kind of like this idea that, you know, the state has this monopoly of violence. That's how they exist. And the richer and more powerful, you know, more people are, like, they kind of lose that monopoly. Like, the violence can go less and less, or else it'll, like, come back at them. So that's an interesting point. I'm trying to wrap my head around that aspect. But I think that going back to what you were saying about communism, and I don't know if you guys know Nassim Taleb, you know, the Black Swan. He basically says
fans of Nicholas Taleb on here.
Okay, yeah. So he's a fellow Lebanese. So he said basically, this was his quote: "At the federal level, I'm a libertarian; state level, Republican; local level, Democrat; and friends and family, I'm a socialist, or whatever you want to call it. You know, it's not about labels at that point.
Yeah.
So it's like the different levels. Like, if with your son or your daughter, aren't you like a communist or a socialist? So it's like, as the organization gets bigger, you're more and more libertarian. That's kind of his mentality.
Yeah. And I get that from him. I mean, I'm an anarchist at every level outside my family, but I get the line of thinking on that.
Mr. Tucson, I completely agree with you. And listening to this space, I have not heard a space like this yet, and I'm so happy to have stumbled upon this tonight, guys.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that. And
you guys are all very educated.
It's a little bit confusing because we host it on YouTube also, so there's two of us on this, so that kind of confuses people sometimes. But yeah, Toxic Airwaves, we host it on YouTube as well. If you want to.
It's very interesting, man. I saw you have a podcast. I follow you. I'm about to listen to this shit while I go to bed tonight, because
nice.
You guys have some very, very interesting thoughts that I have all the time. But I'm Canadian, so lots of the people around me are fucking blue pilled as fuck, but like their heads are in the sand 110 times worse than everybody down there.
That's what I hear.
Speaking of suppression, I'm not allowed to follow anybody. I'm being pulled down by the algorithm. I'm not allowed to follow anybody for like 3 days. I don't know what the fuck that's about.
What do you mean? It just won't let you?
It literally won't let me follow anybody. I tried following crypto and NFT people. It just blocked me. They're like, "Oh, your ratio might."
Well, you don't need to be following fucking crypto and NFT people anyway. So
that's a whole different thing.
I'd like to address a point that Nico made a while back, if I might.
Sure,
go for it.
But anyway, Nico, I have a quick question. Sorry to interrupt you all.
Wait, one sec. Greg's chatting.
My bad.
All right, so earlier Nico was saying that there was nothing keeping the United States together other than the dollar. And I think he was being a little bit hyperbolic, but I think the core of his idea he believes. But I also wanted to say that the United States is like, just the geographical landmass of the lower 48 is essentially like a natural citadel, right? So you've got these two giant ocean moats on either side of it. And then you've got deep water ports in New York and Los Angeles that are naturally fantastic to, export and import. And then inside the middle of the country, paired with one of the biggest agricultural landmasses in the world, you have something like 4,600 miles, maybe it's 7,600 miles of navigable rivers, which is like a force multiplier when you're talking about cities and city-states. So since you can reduce the cost of moving materials from one to the other by floating it, you can then leverage one city's manufacturing processes on another, and basically like what is the Rust Belt now? It's why it was such an industrial powerhouse in the 50s. But yeah, there's a lot of good things geographically in the United States to keep it together. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah, but think about it from this perspective, Greg, and perhaps I misphrase it, right? Think about the original vision of the United States, right? Of like the original vision that the founding fathers had for the United States. They gave it look, it's in the name, the United States, right? So it was designed in a way where the states would have so much more sovereignty over the federal government. And that's just been degraded over time because we share this common currency, because we share the dollar. And
I'm not arguing with you on that point.
Because the seat of power is in DC, right? So like imagine in a Bitcoin standard, right? Like if Florida had its own stash of Bitcoin, California had its own stash of Bitcoin. Do you get what I'm trying to tell you? Like it regresses this country back to the original vision, which I think was an amazing. Look at what it's created, man. It's created the best country on the face of the earth, right? So
yeah, I'm not arguing your point at all. I'm just making the subtle difference that it's not being held together by force. I'm saying that there are demographic and geological factors that make this country act as a whole and give it very large advantages over other geographic locations on the globe.
Fair enough. Yeah, but like, could you imagine, for example, like the route that California is taking right now, where like straight up, kind of experimenting with communism, and it's just like regressing more and more and more and more and more, right? Like, at what point, like, for example, if you live in Texas, right, and California passes some type of law on a federal level, right? What we're seeing right now, dude, the country is so divided because half the country is taking the extreme progressive view, and then half the country is taking kind of the conservative, like, yo, holy shit, this has gone too fucking far. Like, I don't want a fucking dude in a woman's bathroom. I don't think that's too crazy to ask. And then half the country is like, no, it's equality. You get what I'm trying to tell you?
Yeah, but you're talking layer 2, layer 3. I'm talking layer 1, geographic United States and its natural advantages over the rest of the world geographically.
Wow.
But don't you
Yeah,
think
I think I see what Greg is saying basically is that because of the geographic uniqueness here, there's not like there's only a couple of places where you would naturally slice up the country in a pre-industrial thing. Like you have the Mississippi River, you have mountains.
Yeah, like
and
China.
that's about it.
One of the reasons China is such a bitch is like they have all these giant population centers and then nowhere to leverage that manufacturing base by floating it out to the sea. Or in Europe, where you've got this giant manufacturing Rhineland where Germany is, they're this natural powerhouse for Europe, but it's all on a step. It's all a plateau. So anybody who wants to go roll a few hundred tanks across can just disrupt whatever's going on there anytime they want. Or South America, where like if you're in Brazil, great, you've got all these resources in the interior of the country, but if you want to ship them out anywhere, you get a drop off of a few 100-foot cliff down to the ocean, then you got to put that infrastructure together to put it into pasture. The only place that like makes sense in South America where you can have any type of stability is like Argentina, where you have natural borders everywhere and decent productive land in the middle. All I'm saying is that the United States, lower 48, geographically has so many advantages over the rest of the world that like this geographical space is natural allies, period, regardless of what's going up on the social layer.
Yeah.
Hey, Greg. What do you think about northern Canada, all the way up, like near the north, like near way higher in Alaska, like near the Arctic Circle, all the way up there?
What, Russia? When Russia wants to take it over? What are you talking about?
Well, you know how to get up there, right? It's super hard for Russia to cross that border up there because the ice is all melted now.
Boats.
So what you're saying is that global warming is really a Canadian plot to secure their borders?
Nah, it's a communist plot to get China over here to secure our borders, then go and attack America from China.
Yeah. I wanted to go back to Nico's point. It's very interesting. You were saying that like these like COVID passports and stuff like this. Like I can't believe more people are not like concerned about like freedom and liberty. And I mean, the simplest, most principled things as an American.
It's sad.
No, I'm just saying like I just can't believe it. Like I'm in near New York City. I have to go to something and I have to have my COVID. All this, it's baloney. And I went to Tucson. I went to Arizona. What is it? Couple months ago, and it was just awesome. Nobody has this issue in Florida. I'm just like astonished that there's such a big like thing, and like nobody's making. I mean, people, half the country is making an issue of it. Like, how is it being allowed to pass? Like, how is that being enforced legally? Also, it's crazy to me.
George Carlin has a quote for this. He says, "Think about how stupid the average person is, and then realize that half the country is even dumber than him."
Yeah. So I've got like a little bit of a. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, Greg, what you're saying makes a ton of sense to me. That's not something I've spent a lot of time thinking about, but I think that's really interesting, and that makes a lot of sense.
Check out some of Peter Zion's YouTube talks.
Okay, Peter Zion.
Yeah.
Hey, Greg, that's exactly what I was going to say. You sound a lot like Peter Zion.
Thank you.
He's had a lot of good things to say.
So Kiwi Huddle was just, I got a little bit of a segue, but Kiwi Huddle just shot me something in a DM about Meltem. What's her last name?
Meltem Demir is the shit.
Demars, yeah, I saw that.
Apparently she's working for the World Economic Forum now. That's kind of interesting.
It's like a link to their website with a little page on her and a little bio and a blurb, and I guess you could probably tweet that out.
Well, what do you expect from like the leader of the big blockers?
Yeah, we don't. Anyway, we are not fans of her, to put it mildly.
Yeah. I mean, I think kind of like going back
He's
to
a
the
fucking
point.
cunt.
Yes,
exactly.
I think going back to the point of like, why are people so compliant right now? I mean, these people in positions of power, understand what they're doing and understand what it takes to kind of push their agenda of all they have to do is scare the shit out of people and traumatize them, and that's what's happened over the past year. A lot of people are, in their mind, all they can think about is like, when is this shit going to be over? When can I feel safe? When can I breathe air without feeling like I'm threatened? And, these ideas of vax passports and stuff like that, play into it. And, I think like ultimately, we're pretty hardcore on this show. We're about non-compliance. We're about, actual liberty and practicing it in our daily lives and not just like LARPing about it and being like, oh, this is unfair that these people are doing it this way. Like, we use technology to protect our rights. And, there's going to be bad actors like Meltem who go over to the enemy side. Like, the World Economic Forum is our enemy. They're evil people. They want to control people. They want to, I think ultimately what they want to do is like end these, federated fiat currencies and just bring it under one giant fiat currency, or CBDC. And, there's going to be these bad actors in Bitcoin. There's going to be these bad actors all around. And, it's about creating networks of people that are not maniacs, being completely intolerant, being ungovernable, covering your bases so that you're not relying on the government as much. When they come and they're like, we're going to make sure that you're fired, because you don't do what we say, because you fail our compliance test. If you have some economic power built up, if you have a network of people that you can interact with, like that is so much better. And to be like, fuck you, I'm not taking your, compliance reward money. I'm not taking your stimulus. I'm not taking your UBI. I'm going to live in my system. I'm going to live free. Ultimately, I'm going to voluntarily interact with people. And that's how we, combat this stuff. It's, I think like the protesting, it doesn't really do anything outside of show other people that, there's other people that are against it. But, as far as influencing, policy, it does jack shit, because it puts you in a vulnerable place. They can label you insurrectionist and find a lot easier way to throw you in a cage, and just completely dismantle your movement versus when, you're sitting at home growing your own food, stacking sats, maybe, doing home mining or whatever. That's a much more powerful position to be in, and how we, eliminate these things. And I think there is like some power to combating these narratives too. They're coming out and saying that the Bank of England said that Bitcoin's going to lead to a financial collapse, and that's just complete utter bullshit. And I think like what's fortunate for us right now is like people see that, people see that they expanded the money supply by 40% in like a year and a half, and that's going to lead to the financial collapse. And I think we get out there and we meme them to death, with these, with just actual truth. Like it has influence. Like the Let's Go Brandon thing is a great meme, and like fuck these crazy statists that, think that they can tell you what to do. And, ultimately, I think like, I don't know, that kind of upset me, seeing that she's working with, the enemy. It's one thing to be a shit coiner and, try and scam people and make money. It's a whole nother thing to go and work for, the evil people trying to make you eat bugs and live in a box and
getting sleep pod. Hey, news update. Peter McCormick just opened up a Spaces. Yeah, he's up there gathering it all together.
Cool.
Nice.
Peter can go suck one.
Nobody cares.
Exactly.
Is it that one with the congressman?
I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, there was one.
Peter
Suppose
out
I
there
think
has got like
if you
1,000.
Yeah. If you give a shit what some terrorist thinks, feel free to go listen to. I think it's Warren Davidson is the specific
Bitcoin
one.
regulation.
But yeah, it's I don't know, and like with what you were saying, Tucson. I mean, I totally lost my train of thought. All right, I'm gonna shut up for a little bit.
Okay. So
all right, somebody smarter than me, go.
So Lurk just said. You're
what just happened?
Somebody was beating somebody. It sounded like
kids are getting rowdy. Got muted.
Kids are taking over.
I remember what I was going to say before my dumbass forgets again. It's like the example we've used on this show a lot is, this idea of like homeschooling versus, trying to influence the school board. It's like I have no idea what my local school board is up to. They're probably doing some critical race theory nonsense, whatever. I have no idea what they're doing because it doesn't matter to me. It's completely irrelevant. Like my kids are homeschooled. They stay home. They don't go to a Soviet training camp for quote unquote education. And so it just doesn't matter to me. And I think that's how we like improve our lives and how we opt out of this system. We use Bitcoin to opt out of the fiat system. We protect ourselves. We own firearms. We make firearms. We 3D print. We do all this. Like, we use encryption to protect our communication. It's like we don't say, oh, please, sir, Mr. Government, could I please, maybe have a couple more rights if it's not too much of an inconvenience. We say, no, I'm living my life like this. You can go fuck yourself. And it's not just an empty bluff, because I'm putting it into practice. I don't care what my school board's doing because my kids are at home. I don't care. It's like all these different examples. Like there's so many different ways that we can do that.
So Tucson, it makes me think of the Timothy Leary quote. I can't recall it, but anybody know the Timothy Leary quote where it's something about tune out or drop out?
Yeah, tune in something about dropping acid and getting out of society, I believe is the gist of it, right?
But basically, just drop out.
I think it's tune in, turn off, drop out, something like that.
It's turn on, tune in, drop out.
I think that's right.
There you go. That's what Tucson's describing.
Yeah, kind of a bit. It's also, and I don't know. It's to me, it's about taking ownership and responsibility for creating the life that we want to live. I don't know. I've never done psychedelics, so I can't speak to that.
No, it's not about psychedelics. It's about opting out. Like I'm gonna opt out of that program. Thank you very much.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I think it's just like my main thing is we're so much more empowered than we often realize. And
like we're watching this like giant, magnificent cathedral just burn in front of our eyes. And, you know, it's like the people, like the reason so much of this stuff is so crazy, you know, we've all got a billion examples of, you know, masks and vaccine, you know, all this crazy stuff, you know, or this silly stuff they do on CNN. Like the reason this stuff is so crazy, in my opinion, is because they are absolutely just flying out of control, and they've completely lost control. They don't control the narrative. They don't control the resources. They don't control the country. They don't control the society. And they're in, like, I think we're watching the absolute death throes of the American empire that, you know, I mean, it's been going for a few years. It wasn't just COVID. And to me, it's like we're so empowered to opt out of that noise. And that's the frustration for me. You know, when I see Bitcoiners say we need to organize, you know, there was a Spaces a few weeks ago where people were talking about how, you know, the NRA and the AARP is our model for political organization and all this stuff. And I'm just listening to that. And it's not just a difference of opinion. It's, in my opinion, an absolutely just atrocious allocation of resources. And it's like, you're going to take the hardest money that there is, like the most important freedom technology there's ever been, and you're going to give it to a politician, or you're going to take time that you could be using to earn sats to make you and your family more free, and you're going to use that to, you know, do something with some political process. I mean, it's just, it makes no sense to me. And it also doesn't bother me that people just disagree with that. Like, I have very close friends who think I'm completely wrong on this point, and that's completely fine. Like, it doesn't, you know, it's a difference of strategy. It's not a difference of principle. And so it's totally fine in my book. But
yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree, because when we go and we lobby these people, we're giving them legitimacy, versus when we just choose not to engage, you know, and separate ourselves. It attacks this illusion that they have any right to be telling us what to do. And I think that's what's happening over in Peter's space right now. You know, they're talking about like what would be good regulation, what would be bad regulation. You know, honestly, the regulators can go fuck themselves. You know, realistically, they can't stop and they can't control this thing. You know, and we're either playing to win, or we're, you know, playing like they, you know, still have like some sort of semblance of control and meaning. And it's like much more productive to go out there and to give Bitcoin to people, you know, that are producing value in trade for you in your local community, whether it's going to the farmers markets and buying food for Bitcoin, or paying your babysitter, doing things like that, and teaching people, you know, things like taxation is theft, you know, things that people never think about. This is how you protect yourself from these maniacs who think that your private property is their, you know, asset to just completely demolish. Like, you know, and like Steve said, like things could get ugly, you know, at some point, and we have to have the ability to be mobile, you know, potentially, but like, these people are evil, you know, and that's what it comes down to. Are we going to play this game of giving the system legitimacy that just waged a 20-year war in Afghanistan, you know, all for the sole reason to just funnel money through it, you know, taxpayer dollars into the hands of the oligarchs? Like that's what happened with that. You know, are we going to go and like beg these people to not like make us KYC our wallets? Like, fuck that. You know, download an open source wallet on a phone, you know, or whatever, on your computer. That, I mean, we're winning, you know, and that's what it comes down to. And they will like try and stop us from winning, because, you know, when they say things like Bitcoin is leading to an implosion of the monetary system, or is going to cause that, what they're talking about is that it's an implosion for their ability to be, you know, to just sit on their asses and steal all their stuff. Like, that's what Bitcoin is imploding. It's not imploding, you know, the monetary system in the sense of like the average person. Like, when government fails, and it will fail, when everything falls apart, there's going to be free markets, and there's going to be an amazing recovery, because there's not going to be all these regulators stepping in and telling, like, nitpicking people on what they can and can't do, or taxing people. You know, I mean, you just look at like the food prices going up, you know, and they're doing these things like fucking with the gas supplies. That's the reason why, you know, part of the reason why it's going up. It's a combination of them printing money and them going and nitpicking every little thing. Like, we're going to, you know, in California, I hate California so much, but they're like, we're going to place a 65-cent tax on every gallon of gasoline, on top of the 16% tax that the federal government already places. And we're going to, posture like we're helping poor people as their food gets more expensive. Literally everything in their life gets more expensive. Like, fuck them. I'm not playing this game anymore. I'm over it,
Yeah. And we're empowered to opt out. I mean, I think that's my basic point, is that we're empowered to opt out.
Yep.
And that it's not a 0 or 1 thing. Like it's a scale. Like we can opt out in some areas. Other ways it's harder to opt out, but it's like the main thing is we can take actionable steps, every day, every week, every month, every year to be more sovereign and more free. And that's, to me, like the most tangible way I can crystallize it is just that school board versus homeschool example. Like I think we can take that principle and apply it to every interaction with government that we have. The federal part of it is going to take a little while, probably at least a few more years. But that, like, making them irrelevant. And so it's like, yeah, fucking go play your dumb games, go do whatever you want to do. You can't hurt me anymore because, I'm not sending my children into your abuse factory.
Yep.
And because I'm not doing that, you can't hurt me anymore. You can hurt other people's kids, and that, just is horrifically depressing. But, I can at least protect mine, and I can inspire other people to protect theirs. And it's like, that's, to me, like, that's how we grow it, not trying to get the right people on the school board or in Congress or in president or any of that bullshit.
Yeah, and when you pull your kids out of school, those fucking idiots don't get money.
Yeah.
I might have missed that part. Yeah, what about the school boards?
Oh, just so the basic, anyway, so we've used the example I like to use on this school. So my kids are homeschooled, and so the idea is that, like, I don't have any idea what my local school board is doing. Maybe they're pushing critical race theory, maybe they're not. I don't, all this crazy stuff. Like I don't spend a second paying attention to them because they're completely irrelevant to my life. They have no power over me. They have no ability to, influence and abuse my children because I don't send my children into the buildings that they control. And to me, like, that's just one tangible example that kind of, for me, crystallizes my whole view of how I aspire to interact with government in every way, is to make it irrelevant. It's like, I don't have ill feelings towards these people. Like, the people that work there, pretty much none of them have minds, and so it's not like they're even capable of, understanding what they're doing. Like, I don't fault them. Like, they're just kind of responding to stimuli, bouncing through life. It just is what it is. But I can make sure that me and the people that I care about are protected from them. And so that's just the basic example is, it's like, I'm not sitting there trying to get the right people elected to the school board. I'm homeschooling my kids. And that we can apply that to, I think, every form of government interaction. Just some will take a lot longer and are a lot harder than homeschooling.
Yeah. This is great by 12. So divorce doesn't have to turn violent. Not at all. Secession can be peaceful. As for eliminating the state altogether, it's about making them irrelevant, obviating, working around, ignoring, ridiculing. Yeah.
Yeah. 100% agree with that.
I'm a little disappointed. I thought this was going to be Toxic Airwaves. Is that just the name of it? I haven't felt any toxicity so far, so I'm a little bit surprised.
Go fuck yourself.
Perfect. There we go.
Nobody's promoted their shit coins, so we haven't. We talk shit about Meltem.
Well, and
Peter.
Yeah, and toxic doesn't necessarily mean. I don't know. Actually, I don't know what exactly toxic means. It's
the only thing. The funniest term I heard was the Bitcoin dictator. That was the best line of the night so far.
The Bitcoin dictator. Yeah.
What was it? Bitcoin military something. Somebody said it was Bitcoin military dictator or something. I don't know. It was funny.
Was that the guy that asked about what if somebody has 5 million Bitcoin and they can, like,
yeah, that was just funny. Yeah.
That'd be interesting.
I don't know. I called public schools Soviet training camps. That upsets people sometimes. I don't know.
That's
maybe not.
Great. I mean, that's so.
So the title says democracy is a failed system. Can we go into that for a second? I'm trying to understand what the statement's directed towards.
Yeah, sure. So I'll start off on this. So democracy is a failed system because like the whole point of democracy was this idea of like giving individuals power in a way that monarchies weren't able to. And, you know, the problem with democracy is that, you know, and the only, you know, major difference as far as like special privileges for, you know, people is that you just have to get into a position of government authority versus inheriting it as a monarch. So I think that's a good place to start with it, of like, you know, you've just seen over the past year specifically where these maniacs in power, you know, present these mandates on people and then they don't follow it themselves. And that's just a great example of how this works. So that's one point of it. And then two, you know, the second point is that, you know, ultimately a democracy is always going to be in conflict with individual liberties. It's always going to be in conflict with private property because there's going to be people that are out there that are able to vote away your rights and vote away your property. And this has been something that's been inherent in the entirety of American history, where there's been marginalized groups that have had their rights essentially just stolen from them because they weren't a majority. And so, you know, what we see today is this battle of like, we need to battle to be the majority. And ultimately it's, you know, it's just bullshit. Like, you know, it's failed in the sense of preserving, you know, individual liberties. And it is in direct conflict with individual liberties. So those are a couple points I think are important. I'm not sure if you're going to hop into it too.
I just had a real quick shout out. I realized we have a cup sponsor for the podcast. If you're on Spaces, fuck you, should be on YouTube so you can see. But I have a Yeti cup right here that's a present courtesy of Mr. Joe Rogers. Oh, that's cool. So this show is brought to you by Joe Rogers Yeti cups. That's our sponsor for the show. We also have a regular sponsor called Dirtbags Bar in Tucson, Arizona. They are objectively the number one place in Southern Arizona to meet your future ex-wife. So if you're ever in the area, go out to our other fake sponsor, which is Dirtbags Bar in Tucson, Arizona.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like kind of going, thanks for bringing up the sponsors.
Yeah, gotta pay our fake bills with our fake sponsors.
I love Yeti. Their gear is awesome.
And this really was a cup from Joe.
That's awesome. I need to get a cup.
So basically, it's a Busch Light sponsor.
It's one of those black Yeti ones. I didn't show the other side that has the company name on it, but it's a black Yeti cup.
Nice. So I think also kind of going back to democracy, you know, we have to discuss what the state is it's ultimately a monopoly on violence. And, you know, this idea of like a democratic republic, it was this idea of like trying to build in checks and balances to limit government power, which has failed miserably. You know, you just look at things like the Patriot Act, you look at things like income tax, you look at, you know, endless wars or total wars, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, you just rattle them off. Like the ability to, like, this idea of minarchism, you know, is ultimately, you know, kind of silly in the sense of you create a monopoly on violence and you expect it to stay small. And there's no way to do that, especially like when you're looking at the general population of what people want. Most people just want security and they'll just kind of default to whatever. Like every totalitarian evil state that has ever existed, the Nazis, the Soviet Union, Chinese communists, you know, you go down the list, it exists because you have a majority of people that end up supporting it. And I mean, even North Korea, you know, when it comes down to it. And so you kind of like mirror these two things, you know, and I think you have a complacent population that's going to support, you know, the endless, you know, the state. And then you have a monopoly on violence, and it just creates a really, you know, bad system. And so like, you know, the default argument for why democracy is good that I hear a lot of times from people.
Shout out to Alex Gladstein.
Yeah. This is Alex Gladstein. I got in a little Twitter I like him a lot. I have a lot of respect for Alex. I'm not shit talking him, but I strongly disagree with him on this point. You know, I say democracy and private property are in direct conflict, or I'll say democracy is a failed system, and you know, he'll rattle off, well, a democracy is better than a dictatorship. You know, it's freer in the system, and I think that, you know, is ultimately kind of an illusion of the sense of like, you know, a democracy will always end up in a totalitarian state. That's just the way that creating a monopoly on violence leads towards, and this is why minarchism is a silly fairy tale, you know. And so we have to, you know, look at ways that we can construct, you know, what I'm interested in ultimately is organizing locally in my community of the things that I control, rather than trying to go and dictate things up for everybody else and what they should be doing. I think that's an important thing to, you know, differentiate in the system. Or I'm not trying to tell everybody else what they can do. If the people up in Portland want to create a communist hellhole, I've got family up there, I think it sucks. If people in Florida want to, you know, write their own constitution, and, you know, that's cool, but I'm just not really interested in participating in either of those things. So, you know, we can organize society without creating a monopoly on violence. We can, you know, do things like fund defense privately. We can fund police privately. We can organize things locally. We can create, you know, these different systems. And I think ultimately Bitcoin is going to lead us in that direction, and technology will, just like, you know, the printing press led us away from monarchy. I think technology shifts the way that we organize and govern. But yeah, that's my TED talk.
Yeah, no Chomsky. Yeah.
I was going to say, I want to push on that a little bit, because I think I pretty much agree with everything you've said. And fundamentally, I think what I was kind of alluding at earlier is that all minarchism really gets you is an extra 100 years, maybe. Mm-hmm. But as to the point of, I think I'm going to disagree with Alex Gladstein slightly in a different way. When he said dictatorship is worse than democracy, I think that may not be 100% accurate, because the best government to have lived under historically has been the benevolent dictator. And to some extent, you might be able to analogize Bitcoin, or at least Satoshi, as a benevolent dictator who has created a set of rules like a constitution. But unlike every other set of rules that humanity has ever designed, it can't actually be changed. And for all intents and purposes, right now, Satoshi is effectively dead. So his benevolent dictatorship can live in perpetuity. So to some extent, his benevolent dictatorship and the technology that he created has given the technological room for an anarchist society to actually survive amid societies with massive leverages of force.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is something that's interesting in Hans Hoppe's book, Democracy, the God That Failed. It's a really good one if you want to get into this topic of why democracy is dumb. One of the things he outlines first is kind of contrasting democracy and monarchy, and discussing of like why the incentives of a monarch are so much better than a democratic leader. And, you know, he starts off with this idea of like, you know, he has all of this property or land and kingdom that he has to give to an heir. So there's an incentive to take care of it and be a good steward of it versus, you know, the politician that comes in for 4 years and tries to plunder as quickly as they can to come up with, you know, popular programs or whatever. And it's kind of an interesting thing because, you know, I grew up being taught that monarchy was like the most terrible thing and that democracy is really freeing. And, you know, it comes down, it's a system that, you know, I particularly, you know, kind of question sometimes because it has a single point of failure, whether it's a good person or a bad person. I mean, you look at like, I mean, Joe Biden's completely incapable, but imagine he was a monarch and Hunter Biden was his heir. Like, it's kind of, you know,
less than ideal.
on the other side of that, I can speak to like where I'm from in Saskatchewan. We have a lot of resources, and in the mid '80s, there was a lot of money being spent on, or being made rather, off of the potash industry. And then what happened is we got a government elected, and the new minister decided that he would sell all of the potash. He sold all the rights off for what was essentially 4 years worth of revenue. And he did that on the first year of his term so that he could have an advance on that money to spend it and then say, look at all these good things we've done in order to try to get reelected. But in the end, we're now, 30 years later, and we've lost an enormous amount of money by selling it with that very short-term motivation to put the cash in the hands of somebody who knew they were only going to be there for 4 years, maybe 8 at the most.
Jesus.
Yeah. It's a perfect example.
Screwed up incentives.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point. I just want to go back to what you were saying about, and I want to say I understand your point about focus on those around you and supporting local communities, and I think that's key. But my question is kind of like this: if people say that like you need an educated citizenry, like for democracy, that's like a requirement. Like I'm just trying to understand, like on a larger scale, as you scale up, like the local to state to national, how would like building long-term large projects and infrastructure be like organized? It's like I can see like societies like being built from the ground up. I'm just trying to understand, like as it scales, how do you get like the people to make those decisions, those hard decisions? Like somebody like New Orleans to build a dam, or Miami or Florida, like those. Even now, it's hard to get this infrastructure done.
It's hard because of the government, though. I mean, that's the big part. Like, I mean, I think my kind of simple answer would be that, there's already like the ways that humans can organize to achieve things together today is already mind-blowing. Like something as simple as making a car, requires the entire, people from all across the entire world, hundreds and hundreds of different companies, like requires all of this orchestration together just to make a car, like something normal that's done every day. It's incredibly complicated. And I think you can apply that to tons and tons of different areas. And I think there's a very good argument to be made that the reason these things are so complicated and expensive is because the government's involved. Like the textbook.
Look at the Dutch.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, the Dutch.
The Dutch and the Japanese, like they do it nationally. I don't want to cut you off, but like look at Florida and New Orleans. Why are the Dutch and the Japanese able to do these large infrastructure projects? Is that like an education thing or like a societal mindset? Like everybody that's in the society, like they're like not congruent. Like, I'm trying to understand that aspect. Like the state, local government could do it technically, so why aren't they?
Well, I have, you said something about New Orleans and the dams. Well, let's say me and you got together and I asked you, would you want to build a dam for a 1 in 100 year flood or a 1 in 1,000 year flood? Which one would you choose?
I mean, 1,000, yeah.
Yeah, because the cost doesn't matter, right? Because the cost of it failing is going to be way higher no matter what, right? So you either do it for, and that's basically the actual failure of New Orleans, right? They had politicians who couldn't think past those, like, oh, it's going to cost me X amount more. I can crunch this budget and then move the money here, right?
So now we're doing gerrymandering and ranked choice voting and a lot of other things that could fix this. I mean, there's solutions, in my opinion.
Well, I think that when you speak about the Dutch, I think something that they're very militant. They'll excommunicate you real fast, and it's a small community of people. It doesn't scale to 300 million people, I don't think.
That's a good point.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I don't think in any way the government is the solution. I mean, if you walk through any big city, you'll see all these tall buildings that were built. Like I grew up near Chicago, and they have these 100-foot or 100-story skyscrapers that were all funded with private money. And I think ultimately what happens is like, who builds the roads, who builds, hopefully in a freer society, anarchist society, they won't have public schools. in the same way, but who builds the schools? I mean, it's just like you build thing, like if you have a business, you're going to build a road to be able to get trucks to it, you know, and then
I mean,
you can do.
Yeah, people would argue about the corporatocracy at that point. They would say that I can't say the word, but the corporate government basically would like be parallel to the regular government, and they would kind of take over as well. Like that's like a parallel state as well. That's what they would argue at that point.
I think the broader point is that the ability to accumulate resources through theft is trending to zero. To me, that's an undeniable fact for anybody that's spent some time looking at Bitcoin. Well, and so that's the only way that the government is able to acquire resources is through theft. And it's like their ability to tax through inflation is impossible with Bitcoin. Their ability to tax through regular taxes is much, much more difficult with Bitcoin. And so to me, the broader point is I see their ability to accumulate power and resources rapidly trending to zero. And so there's a lot of things. Well, if there's no government, who builds the roads? Like there's a lot of questions like this. And to me, the most complete answer is that world is coming. We're going to figure out what it looks like. It's going to be interesting. Yeah. Some things are going to work, some things aren't. Some people are going to come out ahead, some people are going to come out behind.
Good point.
But it's like the broader point is this thing that currently does an incredibly shitty version of all these different things is going away in our lifetime. Could easily be this decade or the next one, to where it won't exist anymore. And so to me, it's like, okay, so we get to figure out what that world looks like. And yeah, I think like just like another point we've talked about on here before on our Monday nights, but it's just it's like what I like, I guess what I like try to like the point I like to make is that it's like, there is no mass to me. Like I don't care about mass adoption. I don't care about convincing the masses. I don't care about any of that. Like historically, I think 3 to 5% is more than enough of a population to fundamentally change absolutely everything, and that's plenty. And I think if we can get anywhere close to those numbers with sovereign Bitcoiners, the whole paradigm shifts. The whole thing changes. And maybe 97%, maybe 95% of the population is completely opposed to it, doesn't like it. They want to vote for stealing, that whatever. Like that just means it takes a little bit longer. Like it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And so it's like this change, and in my view, it's undeniable. This change is being brought about by Bitcoin. Like we're transitioning to a world without a state, and it's going to be interesting to see how a lot of those problems get solved, or if they're even problems. Like I'm sure there's tons of stuff that we think are problems today that once there is no government, we're like, oh no, that wasn't even a problem. I don't know. I think there's gonna be a lot of interesting stuff to figure out and to watch.
Yeah. So Zorn says corporations are not rational either, as they obfuscate responsibility and accountability. And yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Corporations do bad things. We see it all the time. Pharma is a big example of that, and they're coming up quite a bit. But what happens is, in an actual free market, is a corporation behaves poor. Like imagine in a free market, if Johnson & Johnson came out and made baby powder that gave your kids like major issues, like people wouldn't go buy that shit anymore, and they would go out of business. But what happens ultimately in a system like we have in crony capitalism is all of these companies that are able to take control of the regulatory institutions and get massive subsidies don't go away, and they just kind of continue to exist and get to behave poorly. So I think that's what's different, and what it comes back to again is kind of what 12 said earlier. Corporations aren't government because they're not telling you what to do with your property. Like they don't have the monopoly on violence to be able to enforce these things in the same way. That's the big distinguishment. And, when we end the state, we also get tons of cool guns, and we get tons of cool weapons, and we have the ability to protect ourselves in ways that, you know, we can't right now. That eliminates the possibility of that happening in the same way.
But one thing to also realize is that corporations are creatures of the state. Humans will always be able to coordinate themselves. They don't necessarily need some sort of a formalized legal structure. And just the fact that the fact inherent in what I said, formalized legal structure, it is a beast of the state. And you make the state go away, and the corporation as a thing goes away too.
Yeah. And there's so many examples of people self-organizing to solve problems. Like as a while ago I was reading about, I think it was in Africa or something, but it was like one of like the tribes, like a relatively sizable society with no structure, no government, whatever. And they didn't have a law that said rape is illegal, but they had a custom that said if you rape somebody, the male relatives of that person get to decide your fate. You know, spoiler alert, like they don't give you a handshake and tell you to go on your way. Like it's not good. I mean, it is good because of who it happens to, but it doesn't turn out well for that person. And it's like, there's a lot of, you know, and that's a pretty extreme example, but I think there's a lot of structures that developed where, you know, like what I think that was Arceris, I believe, you know, that like these legal constructs are a product of the state. Like this idea that we need to have formal this, then this, then this, then this, you know, in every area of society is I think pretty ridiculous. And I think that, you know, there's tons and tons and tons of examples of people self-organizing to develop customs and rules and principles that, you know, create a much more enjoyable environment to live in.
Yeah. If we get rid of the state, we won't have Jeffrey Epsteins in the future.
Yeah, literally.
Yep.
I mean, the only reason why you need to assemble a corporation is basically to protect yourself from the state.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah. 12 says intellectual property dies with the state. Just ruminate on that for a while and see where you end up. Yeah, 100% agree.
I look forward to that. I'd like to play music in my streams that's copyrighted.
As a former intellectual property attorney, I co-sign that sentiment.
Yeah, IP is just so silly. Yeah. I mean, the internet and IP are just completely at odds. They cannot coexist. I think we're seeing that. All right. Well, it just rolled over 2 hours.
Yeah. Does anybody have any closing thoughts? Anybody that's been disagreeing the whole time and thinks we're stupid wants to say so, feel free.
Any diehard status bootlickers in here? They're all in Peter's room.
But seriously, we never get offended by anything. So if you hear us say anything you think is stupid, please feel free to jump on and tell us we're stupid.
Yeah.
It's fine.
We should start every show out with that. Caveat that. We're willing to trade blows. We got any shout outs? Dirtbags Bar?
We got Dirtbags Bar. If you're in Arizona, October 26th is the Halloween party for our Arizona Bitcoin meetup. This Saturday is Tucson.
23rd, yep.
23rd is Tucson Bitcoin meetup. If you're in the area, come check it out. Is there anything else?
Christmas party in December.
Oh, yeah. Southern California Christmas party, December 15th. Is that right?
And by the way, apparently San Diego, the area we're going to be going to for the Christmas party is a much freer place than Austin, Texas. So
yeah, we got a on-the-ground report from one of our Toxic Airwaves listeners, Gazala. She said that Austin was... She said she liked the Uber driver and the hotel made her wear a mask or something like that, and it seemed pretty clear that San Diego was a much more free environment.
There.
Well, the Uber drivers, you know, everywhere, it's kind of hit or miss, but the hotel, man, you know it's bad when the hotel's handing you. But yeah,
if you're in Austin, this is Skeef, SKEEF _25 on Twitter. I'll be at the Beefsteak, so hit me up.
Yeah. Looking forward to Wednesday. with Weinicus and Optimus on Bitcoin Kindergarten. One of my favorite Bitcoin shows.
Thursday Night Meme Factory with Greg.
Yep. I actually watched the last one. It was pretty good.
Yeah.
With CK Snarks, I think, was on it.
I liked everyone on there except Greg, actually.
Fuck Greg.
Everyone else was pretty good.
Fuck you, Greg.
Yeah. I'm trying to...
Yeah, I was really annoyed that Greg was making good points, so I couldn't say "fuck you, Greg." But so, fuck you, Greg, for making good.
Yeah, that stuff about the lower 48. I'm looking that guy up. That's not something I've spent a lot of time thinking about, but he was making a ton of sense to me.
Yeah, trying to think of anything else. Yeah, we're rolling in Arizona. We're gonna have some pretty cool stuff coming up. I'm pretty stoked about. Phoenix is definitely taking the route, but I think we're gonna have some privacy, Bitcoin privacy presentations coming up in the near future, which I'm stoked on. Tucson, we're working, or this upcoming week, we're gonna be talking about how do we, make our own food and exit the fiat food system. So I'm pretty stoked on that, how Bitcoin can play a massive role in that. I'm almost done with my chicken coop, so that's going to be a fun experiment.
I'm going to be buying eggs over Lightning once it's done. I'm very excited about that.
The next step for me is going to be mulching my yard, which she gave me a tip that if you go and you reach out to your local landscapers, they might be happy to just dump a shit ton of mulch at your house for free.
Nice. Just to get rid of it.
Yeah, just to get rid of it.
Oh yeah.
Because I think the alternative they would have to go pay money to dump it at the dump.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a pain.
That makes sense. Like they do a bunch of tree work or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have a good evening.
You too.
Hope to see you guys soon.
Thanks for dropping in, Jeff. Well, I think that's the show. Thanks for
right.
everybody tuning in.
Cheers.
Cheers.